Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we will be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm your co-host Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Riot on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host Kristen. You can find me at TensTBR on all social media platforms.
And we are still fundraising for Code Pink, so the link for that will be down in the description below. And now we can get into our June book club pick.
Yes, so we did read this over on Fable. There will be a link below if you want to join us to read our next month's pick. Every month we do a book, and because it's Pride Month, we did a vote for all queer novels, but Giovanni's Room won by a significant margin this month, whereas I think it was almost half the people that voted for Giovanni's Room specifically, which I honestly hadn't even heard of it until Mariah brought it up to me.
I don't know how you haven't heard of it. It's such a popular, beloved, queer classic.
I mean, I don't know. It's just so that nobody ever around me ever read it, or really ever, I knew James Baldwin's name, but I never, really, knew anything about him, really, you know?
Yeah, and hopefully for people who are listening, we can fill you in a little bit on who exactly James Baldwin, or not, I can't say is, who he was.
He's died.
He has since passed. He was born in 1924, so yeah, even if he didn't get esophageal cancer, which that is what he ended up dying of at the age of 63, which is quite unfortunate. He was a very big activist, very into politics, and
civil rights activist specifically.
Yeah. He got very popular from this debate that he did with a guy named William Buckley. And the topic of the discussion was, has the American dream been achieved at the expense of the American Black person? I'm not going to say the term that was actually used, but we'll have the link to that below. And I was listening to it before we got started on this. And he does a really good job of kind of encapsulating precisely what is going on, because the other people who were arguing were very white, which is, I guess, to be expected at the time. But when James was talking, every eye in that room was on him, and he did a really good job. He's a fantastic orator. But what I didn't know, I knew Baldwin had some very radical politics, but I didn't know he was actually a communist, a good and proper communist. He got introduced to communism by his teacher, which I thought was what a way to be. Teachers are transformative. I love that. And he ended up falling into a Trotsky group, which was called the Young People's Socialist League, in 1943. So, it was very popular, that would be around. I think his teacher was part of a different group, but he didn't end up staying within that, to my knowledge. But he was a communist at the end of the day. And his two most revealing comments about his political orientation in this period, he wrote that Worth urged him to join, and I did. I then outdistanced him by becoming a Trotskyite, so that I was in the interesting position at the age of 19 of being an anti-Stalinist when America and Russia were allied. Later, in a letter to Aurelia Miller, which was the teacher, written when he was 31 in 1955, Baldwin wrote of this period: after my father died, I bounced around in the classical bohemian fashion, messed around in politics, made it all the way from Stalinist to anarchist, in what I think must be a record time. So he explored a lot, he read a lot, so he was changing his mind. But all of this and his activism did yield the FBI forming an over 1,800 page file on James Baldwin, which there's a book that I will have linked down below. It's called FBI's. There's no reviews on this book, but it's all about how the FBI pursued Black authors and literature, which I think is really interesting. And I've never heard of it. There was only 30 reviews on Goodreads for it, so might be something worth checking out.
Yeah, which I mean, this is something that just shows to how much we as Marxists specifically, because even though he maybe have never declared to be whatever his specific political ideology is he is obviously very clearly left wing, and then also showing how much like education is what leads you to that too, and promoting reading so much work and learning, and just like how education is what shapes who you are and what you believe. And James Baldwin is another great example of how being one of them, like a more educated person, will have you sympathetic to left wing ideology, no matter
It is
what
very true.
sector it falls under, because it's such a there is a wide variety of us over here.
There is so much to go around, and I know we jest, we joke, we prod like some of the other
Groups,
varieties,
yeah,
flavors that we don't necessarily like concretely agree with. But at the end of the day, like we're so far from beyond or being able to just to be like, no, like we're not having a Menshevik Bolshevik split. Like we
not
just need
yet.
some sort of class solidarity right now.
Yeah,
And I think books like this are really important because of the artistry behind them. And if you don't know what this book is about, I think most people know at the end of the day that this is a queer novel, which you can go into it with just that, but it is about just like a man like learning about his own sexuality during a very interesting time in like Paris.
1950s
And
Paris.
so and he's an American in Paris, and kind of like some of the cultural differences, and also just like his overall relationships. This is not a very like action packed book. This is very much like historical. It's not
Lit
even historical
fic.
fiction. It's
It's
just
just
lit fic.
literary
It's a
fiction.
classic. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's like all you need before going into this to stay as blind as physically possible to get
yeah.
the most out of this.
Well, like, like if you really like, it's a character focused novel. So, like, if you're into like any literary figure, like, there's no real like plot in this either to like spoil, because there's not really much of a plot that happens within this book. It's genuinely like you're following a character and his journey over like maybe a year or so in Paris, and like how he's discovering himself and how that affects the people around him through the choices that he makes. Like, it's like very much like, I think if you like Sally Rooney kind of vibes, and like I don't even know like what a modern equivalent really is of this,
I don't know any off the top of my. It's
but
very
like
unique.
but we are also like Mariah and I were not big litvic readers either. Like, we've read a couple, but like that's not really a genre I personally gravitate towards either.
But it's books like this that do make me want to read more because I do think I get a little bit more out of literary fiction when it's good literary fiction. Because I think that's the issue is there's like obviously the popular like weird girl lit fic, which they're kind of just nothing burgers.
Yeah.
But then there's like books like this where I can totally understand like why it's so beloved. And when I was looking on Goodreads for this, it has a 4.34 star average with over 278,000 ratings and 38,000 written reviews. And Goodreads has only been around for so long, like the internet hasn't been around forever. So I
This
totally
book
get like,
predates the internet.
oh my god, shocker. But yeah, you know.
I mean, and then this, I think it's like the, I don't even know what anniversary edition, but this is like the new anniversary edition, the one that I have, if you're watching the video version in my background too, where they're like, it's obviously relevant in popular culture too, to be. Isn't it his most popular novel?
I think so. I could double check. I'm pretty sure it's either that or Fire on the Mountain, or is it Letters from a Native Son? He
That
has a
sounds right to
lot
me.
of work.
Yeah,
We'll
well, because
look
I
it
just
up.
feel like James Baldwin's always been like one of those like authors that I feel like you always hear his name and like in association to his work. But I think it's interesting too that like whenever we're in school, like I don't really know of anybody that like had quote unquote had to read like James Baldwin in school, where I feel like he could have those novels. Where I guess maybe it's because like the maturity of this is a little bit older, and I imagine there probably are like college classes that do dedicate a whole class to being able to like analyze his work, because there's so much to it.
Yeah, but also because of like the politics of it, which this one is a relatively tame. I think his other works are a little bit more. overt, I suppose. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
a lot more like allegorical. You're getting a lot of symbolism that you're parsing through, and just like your general, like the plot is like the character development. So it's a little different. I wouldn't be surprised if this has been on like banned book lists
I don't
because of
know.
the
It's
nature of the
never.
books.
I don't know, but I feel like I never see it on like the banned book like tables and stuff. I mean, imagine it's been banned because Republicans ban everything, even if it has nothing to do with anything.
Well, especially with like the FBI,
Yeah.
you know. Apparently this is a very frequently banned book, but it's never on the list. And I wonder if it's because the people that are making like the banned book, like if you ever look through one of these like banned book lists, they're very, very long. And I feel like people cherry pick perhaps ones that are
More
they're
popular.
going to
Like,
resonate to.
I think a
So it's going
lot
to be
of.
like white liberals that are picking out books
I wonder if
that
it's
they
like.
think are interesting. But if maybe we can go back through and look and see if we can find like genuine banned books that like make sense why they're banned. Does that
But
make
I mean, like,
sense?
even this one doesn't even make sense. Like, well, that's the thing. Like, saying that something makes sense to be banned, I feel like is like desensitizing the idea that books should be banned. Mariah and I do not believe any book should be banned really for anything. You know?
Banned in my household, maybe, but not
Well,
in the general
not
public.
like in like the general sense. Whenever like, because the thing with like banning books, whenever they ban those, then usually what it does is it makes the book less accessible. Because I think that's something too. Like whenever like someone's like, I don't care, I like a books get banned, I can still go buy it in like a shop or whatever. But whenever a book gets banned, that makes it where it's not able to be in like a public library or in like a school library or something, and then that instantly makes it less accessible for maybe the people that need to read it the most.
Yeah, but then you also have like the weird people that are kind of starting to come out of the woodworks who are like, "Oh, look, I got this special edition of Mein Kampf and I'm posting it on my
Oh,
Bookstagram and I'm very anti-banned books and I think people should just read things and understand things." Like I think there's a little bit of a nuance and wiggle room, but
with
that's
the
just I
idea
don't
of
know,
a
is that a hot take?
the idea of a special edition of Mein Kampf, that's where the problem is, and that's like capitalism's fault, though, is it not? Like
And like the
the fact that
normalization.
it's very frustrating, like just the whole idea of it. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that it'll be really hard for. There's no really way for us to talk about any of the themes within this book without spoiling it either. Which I would say, like my spoiler review, I think it's worth the read. It's very short. It's less than two. My copy, anyways, is less than 200 pages, and it is a very slow paced novel, and it is a very character focused novel. Where I think if you are like me, I do not prefer character based novels, and I do not prefer slow paced novels. But I do think that this is an important read, and I think it's kind of sectioned in a way where like there's two parts, and the chapters, there's very few chapters because the chapters are like usually 20 to 30 pages, where you can kind of, if you're already somebody who's reading like 100 books a year or 50 books a year or something, setting aside 20 pages a day for like, what is it, like 10 days maybe, not even 10 days to take you to read this, to read a chapter, then you can get through this while also reading something else. Because I know that was what was hard for me, was getting me to sit down and read it. But I would tell myself, like, you're not allowed to read the book that you want to read until you read like your chapter. Until I think the latter half does pick up significantly, but the first couple chapters I do think are very slow. But I think if you're able to pace yourself and like sit down and think with what you're reading, which this is one of those, then you can end up enjoying it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I haven't given an official like star rating. I do think like the 4.34 star is like pretty accurate. I overwhelmingly enjoy James Baldwin's writing style. I do think that I don't know if you felt the same way, but like Hanif Abdurraqib, like his writing style like is kind of similar with like the poetic nature
Like
of
the
it, but obviously
lyricalness of it.
yeah.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. It's like very poetically written, where for me, whenever I was reading this, like I had to read like some paragraphs out loud to make sure I was fully comprehending it, because I would get into like a rhythm where like I would just like read a paragraph and I felt like I was kind of just skimming the paragraph and I wasn't comprehending it until I read like the paragraph out loud, because they do get very wordy.
But I feel like the punctuation was quite important for the pauses that James was trying to convey. I really liked it overall. I thought the allegories and symbolism were really beautiful, and its execution. I think there's definitely some criticisms that can be made because James only had so much time in his life to be educated to the fullest degree, but also I can't necessarily fault him because I don't know everything about his politics, and I do think it's more so David's character that is thinking and doing these things, that it's not necessarily an indication that like,
But we
because there's
don't.
some
We'll discuss
questionable
that.
things about like potential transphobia in here, but I do wholeheartedly think it's just David's perspective, but I
We will
we'll get
discuss it.
into all of
Yeah.
that. All in all, it is. I also recommend this novel, which this is just a good pick overall. I'm really glad this one for the book club. This is a good book club book. I think you should do this in person, like an IRL book
Like if
club
you have a
book.
group to read it with and discuss. There's a lot. Like I'm sure even with like what our discussion we do too, we will not hit every single point that could be made within it.
So now's your chance before we enter the spoiler zone.
Um, do you want to go about this chronologically or just go wherever the wind takes us?
I think it would probably make more sense to do this as chronologically as possible. So,
Okay.
I mean, I can always go in like chapter by chapter if you want, or
I think
unless,
I
I
can
don't know, you have a
remember
different.
like the basic. Well, because so it starts off where Hella has basically already left uh David, and
And
Dave
Hella is
is
David's
David's
fiance,
fiance. Well,
potential
kind
fiance.
of, because the idea that Hella's left because she wants to basically like go discover herself before she decides to commit herself to a relationship, which makes sense, you know. It seems well, the 50s are also a very different time than how like relationships are now. So I don't know how like accurate it is per se. I know like in Europe they kind of had like women had a little bit more of like freedom of a sense, even though like she was an American and David was an American, where they were a little bit more like free flowing with their relationships versus in like America at that time. There's no like leaving to discover yourself if a man is asking you to marry him, right? Like you're kind of like just cooked. um but then Hella has this opportunity to go to Spain and she's like, maybe, basically. So they're not like officially together, really. But then you have David, who he kind of, one talks about his past, where he was raised and his first queer experiences, because his mother died whenever he was very young. And he's basically raised by his aunt and his father. But his father is insinuated to be like an alcoholic basically, and not, he's there for David in a way but also not there to be a full parent to him because it's being a single parent household, and he is, his father's kind of shown as like a womanizer maybe in a way after his mother dies, and he doesn't have like the stability of like a two parent household. And so then David is kind of growing up in this broken household with like very few memories of his mother, and then also this alcoholic father that is very emotionally distant from him.
Yeah, I remember there was a line. I wonder if I can find it. Oh, so he says something really interesting that I thought was worthy of discussion, but he says in regards to his relationship with his father, says we were not like father and son. My father sometimes proudly said we were like buddies. I think my father sometimes actually believed this. I never did. I did not want to be his buddy. I wanted to be his son. So he, and I think this, a lot of this ties back into the politics of the time, and a lot of these like fathers, because they were working so much, they didn't have what was I saying? The reasons that like the father, like I imagine being a single father in the 1950s when like you've been told your whole life and you've been socialized in such a way where like men were just supposed to be breadwinners. They're supposed to be like not the homemaker. You're not supposed to be like emotionally enriching these children. That was like woman's work.
Yes.
So I thought that was a really interesting line to throw in there. And I think it really kind of makes sense of David's character overall with his like he sees his father who's just trying to like fill a void, that he's very sad that his wife passed, and despite getting like a new fiance, it's still like he's not happy.
Well, it's interesting too that like whenever because he refers to uh like he doesn't like he has like a stepmother, which I don't think he ends up getting the stepmother until like his teenage years in life too. So then his only mother figure was his aunt, who one he didn't even like either. He had a very negative relationship with her, which is very interesting, which we can talk more too. I just think it was really weird about how like throughout this novel, like most of the characters in this novel, besides Hella, are pretty much just gay men. And it's really interesting to me the way that it's shown that all of these gay men are like almost like they're gay because they hate women in a way. And I felt like there was a lot of misogyny present in this novel. And I thought that was a really interesting choice where obviously I don't know like the ins and outs of queer relationships back in like the 50s, but I think like now almost it's like it like recontextualizes like why like intersectionality is so important in every way, you know?
Yeah, it kind of brings it back to like occasionally we'll get like this discourse from gay men on the internet who will say like, "Oh, like I'm a gay man because I hate like pussy, like I hate vagina. It's repulsive to me." And it's like, "Whoa, that's a really weird thing to say."
Yeah.
Like, should we like sit in there and understand like why that is? And I do think it kind of ties into the broader aspect of like why transphobia is also prevalent within some like gay and lesbian spaces. Like there's people that are just very anti, like there's gay men that are like no trans men because they think they're just like butch lesbian women, and like the same goes for like the lesbian women who are like no, you have to be like you're just a
You have to be a
man
cis
in
woman.
women's drag. Like they
Yeah.
say these really horrible things, and I feel like James would like that. Maybe that was the intention of these characters, kind of like analyzing it, because then you also have like Hella eventually who ends up coming back in, who has some interesting things to say about womanhood. I don't want to get too far ahead, but David's character is like already building, especially like once he starts going to those gay bars and he finally meets Giovanni and
Mm-hmm.
Jacques or whatever his name
Was
is.
Jacques. I thought his name was like
Jacques?
Jacques. Well, but he was
I
already
don't know. I'm
friends
not
with
French. I'm
Jacques.
sorry.
Well, he wasn't French either. I think you said he was born in Belgium, but then raised in America. That's why he was friends with him before he was in France. Like with like Jacques' character specifically, because you're kind of introduced very early on with him. I don't want to say a predator because like it's not like we see him very much interact with other characters. We kind of get like just him being friends with David at first, and then David kind of like insinuates that Jacques is very creepy, especially with younger men specifically, and Giovanni is a younger guy. So I know David's not old per se, he's not 30, but he's more like late 20s sort of age, where I'm guessing Giovanni is supposed to be like early 20s sort of vibe. And that's like Jacques kind of like being a wealthy queer man kind of like preys on these younger people that don't have one like an established career or have like experienced established relationships, and so he's holding that power dynamic over them by being the wealthy person and also the older person in this novel specifically. And that even like shows whenever it's introduced to, I don't know how to say this guy's name either, Giovanni's
Guerme?
boss. Sure. I don't
I think
know.
that's how it was said
It's
because I did a tandem. It was like Guerme. I'm so sorry. It's
we're
these are
not
harder to
French.
pronounce
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
But yeah, he and like Giovanni's dynamic is very similar to Jacques and David's, where they
But
like
David is like at the beginning of the novel, he's like, basically, I'm not gay. I don't like boys like that. But earlier in the scene, you do know that because, like, I don't know if there's a chapter before too. He talks about like his first queer experience being with one of his friends, and then whenever they did end up having coitus, whatever you want to call it, like, then that scared him and it made him not want to be friends with the guy he was liking anymore because it scared him because of his own internalized homophobia. And especially with, it's really interesting how the way this novel paints the difference between like America and France at the time, where America obviously like being queer and being gay, was it criminalized? I mean, obviously it wasn't like
Yeah, I think
legal.
there was sodomy laws though.
Yeah.
Like that is like what they ended up like being rooted in. It was just like sodomy laws.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of if there was any other
Like specific.
specific laws, but
That's what
those
I
were
was trying to think.
typically
Like,
what it
yeah.
would fall under cuz like it, predominantly it would be against gay men were like the target because women
Yes.
were just confused.
Yeah. Then they just get sent to the loony bin. Um, but then like how almost in like France and stuff, like sexuality was more open and accepted. And so I think that's what shows the difference too between like Giovanni's character and David's character too, where being an American and being queer, and this is something that still so many queer people face today about having to like hide your true self and who you love because of like the way our legislation is and the way that society will treat you if you're not like cis and heteronormative.
Yeah, and I
Even
think
if
that's
you
like
are
the
like,
ultimate contradiction between like David and Giovanni's relationship is because David is fully aware that like eventually he's like, I'm an American, I have to like get married, I have to have children, I have to do all of these things, I have to abide by these social constructs. And I think David's a little naive and he's just like, yeah, sure you are, like we're gonna be together forever. But David's very like, my dad has my money. I have to like do these things, and he's trying to like get money more. Like it's very confusing, like his position in Paris, like what he's doing. I don't know if you felt that way, but like he's kind of
yes.
just meandering and vibing. He's not really working or doing anything.
Yeah, like, well, that's one thing too that I thought was really weird, and I think it could have been like explored better because like the only person with a job in this whole book is literally Giovanni. Everybody else is just like flying by the seat of their pants. And like we have constantly have like David begging Jacques for money, begging his dad for money, begging random people that he has met before for money. And I like, honestly, like, I just so, I don't know about you, but I just feel like this is like, I don't know, incredibly unrealistic, I guess. But I don't even know, like, I don't even know what kind of wealth even like David's father has, like, because it doesn't really discuss that all too in depth, you know?
No, but he's like doing anything he can to extend his time
Well,
and to
because I
be
think he's
away
supposed to
from
be like
America.
in school, quote unquote. Because his dad does have like a line saying like, "How long can you study for? You're almost 30." But it's like he's not really in school at all, is he, or anything, you know? And like he's kind of just doing whatever, staying in
Yeah,
Giovanni's
it's
room.
which that is also like another part. It's just like what like Giovanni's room kind of symbolizes within their relationship. It's like their only real safe space because they do go out into public and there's like moments where they're happy and they're walking around and kind of like fraternizing, but they're not showing any sort of like PDA.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting because like Giovanni's room is a wreck. Internally, it the windows are painted so nobody can see in, and it's just like them existing in their little bubble, which it's just it's not the way for a healthy relationship to function. Like you can't just stay hidden inside behind closed doors.
And Giovanni is very content with this lifestyle in this way because even whenever because David does bring up like, oh, like Hella's gonna come back at some point. Like I've asked her to marry me, and like whenever she does come back, like he's like, I don't think this relationship will continue. And Giovanni's like, why? Because we're like, she's not gonna let you out and about and like have friends and like stuff like that without like understanding like not only with David not being confident in himself as like a queer man or a gay man and like accepting himself as a gay man, but then also how I think almost like monogamous like American relationships are. I guess, too, where I don't, again, like Mariah and I do not know any of like the cultural differences with like how relationships are in like France or even like 1950s France. But I think like the way monogamy is such a thing in this, and you, it's really interesting too how like the two American characters are like the monogamous people, while you kind of have like Jacques and Giovanni's boss. I'm not saying his name. Uh, like just kind of like they're able to, one, because they're in queer spaces, also like not necessarily have to be devoted to one person, where they're kind of just like always flirting and talking and being with other people. And I think Giovanni kind of has that too, because even whenever like they first meet and stuff, where um Jock is like, oh, like you can like get Giovanni started for me, but don't forget like Giovanni's for me. And then David's like basically like, yeah, I'm not queer, so you don't have to worry about that. But then obviously
They kind
that's
of just like
not what
fall
happened.
into
Yeah.
each other. Like that's just
Yeah.
not how relationships work. And you can kind of tell that he's a little peeved when this happens
Mm-hmm.
because he's like he makes some points where he I think he's more so frustrated with David because he's like you can't go your whole life not being your like truest self, your fullest self because otherwise you're going to be like me, you're going to be old and you're going to have like a
Creepy.
lot of regrets from
Yeah.
not like being able to express yourself and now it's kind of all coming out. It's like Jacques it seems like it's all coming out all at once.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's why he's being perceived as creepy because he's just like
He doesn't have a care
I'm
in the
down
world anymore.
DTF for anything and anyone.
Yeah, which I mean, and then this first initial bar scene too is whenever like the main like transphobia is as well, because he is in this gay bar and there are like either trans women or drag queens. It never is like explicitly stated like which side of the spectrum they fall on, like the gender spectrum sort of thing. But you just have like David's disgust to it, and then the way that he feels like how they're not really women is like basically what he says. And that was really jarring, I think, especially reading it. Like obviously it's the 50s, so like society looks at it way differently now than they did in the 50s. And to me, like I don't, obviously, like I don't know if James Baldwin ever really like publicly talked about trans people either, but with the way that David had such internalized homophobia, to me that's what it read as, more just like internalized homophobia. And who knows, David even could be trans if he ever let himself fully explore that, but he doesn't let himself explore any of that without being away from and locking himself away from everybody he knows and loves.
Yeah, it almost feels like an extension of that internalized homophobia. Like it's being disguised as like an utter hatred of women and people who are trying to present that way, which is why he's unfaithful because he talks about like how like he has like an affair with other women and like he saw his father having affairs with other women. So like maybe like it's circling back to that, even though like I'm not trying to justify it. I just think like that like as a literary that it is his character, it would make sense
Mm-hmm.
logically within this story. not,
Yeah.
not that it's just he's a very flawed individual, and I think
He's
that's what
like
makes him
an
such a
evil
good
character.
character.
Like David is like literally evil. And this is one of those books too where there's kind of really no one to root for. You know,
He's
like
so destructive to everyone around him.
yes. And so is Giovanni too in a lot of ways as well, with like the ways that like I think you see this a lot in like mentally ill people too, and then like it makes sense whenever you can't be your true full self, and so you feel like you're suffering, and so what you do to continue that suffering is by actually making bad choices and putting yourself into harm's way. So and you are being like, this is what I deserve for being such a bad person, is by putting other people in harm and making other people hate you as well. Like you want other people to hate
Yeah.
you as much as you hate yourself.
Which kind of like gets to the root of the like kind of class element within this novel is like Giovanni and Guillerme's like their situation, like how he's able to have his job, and then as soon as he loses his job because he's in an active relationship with David, and Guillermo is very jealous of this and makes a
Yes.
big spectacle because of this small French town that they're living in. He's having a very difficult time trying to like secure employment, but it kind of gets to the point where he's no longer even looking for it. He's kind of just dwelling in his own despair, and he's kind of just like, well, as long as I have David and I can have that one solace of happiness within our apartment, like we can make it work. Like he can find money. He's like the more adultier adult here.
But it's interesting too because the way that David and uh Giovanni's relationship is to where David does not respect Giovanni in the way because like Giovanni is presented as like the breadwinner because he is the one that has the job for the majority of their relationship. But then then David is expected to like be at home and like clean up the apartment and stuff like that. But he doesn't want that either. He like because they like talk about whenever they have like their big fight, like how you want me to be the woman in this relationship sort of thing. And he's like, I don't want to be the woman, you know? Which is like such an interesting way to perceive it because like how in relationships, like queer relationships too, how they're always trying to put like a binary onto relationships that don't need to have a binary unless like the people in that relationship want it perceived that way.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me like if you grow up in like a red county or anywhere, like people will ask like in different like lesbian relationships, like, well, which one of you is the man in the
Yeah. Who
relationship?
wears
And
the
it's like, well,
pants?
we're both women. Like that's at the end of the day is what it is. And it seems like they're kind of wrestling with it, which to this day I feel it's so like topical. It is a
Yeah,
very
it's still
topical
relevant.
novel and
These are still like
concept.
relevant themes and ideas that I think queer people are still facing to this day, which I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing about this book too, like how much has really changed about society from that, you know, which maybe it could be just because also France was more progressive at the time for queer people.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's certainly a
Yeah.
lot to think about. And then we have Hella's character once she gets reintroduced, seemingly out of the blue for poor Giovanni, but David is very aware of when she's going to come and
Yeah.
show up. And it's a weird little relationship because Giovanni does raise some, although he's trying to like inspire or instill like doubt in her allegiance, her loyalty to David, like, she's just like whoring around in Spain. Like, why is she a single woman trying to like go around? Like, what else is she doing?
Which is so crazy to me. It's like, okay, so she's not allowed to go sleep with other people, but then David's doing the exact same thing and not given that negative connotation of being a whore or a slut or whatever have you, when they're both kind of doing the same things just in different places of them discovering themselves on whether or not like this marriage is what's best for their relationship. And obviously for Hella, she decides that she does not want to be alone. She does want to have a partner, and that obviously David has been good enough to her where he's not beating on her or forcing her to do anything. Like he is for the 1950s, I'm sure he seems like a very progressive guy externally, you know, because again, the I think one of like the major themes too of this where it's like you don't really necessarily know anybody fully because like you only get what people present to you, especially with like the way David's character is like internally he has like some very like disturbing thoughts and very evil thoughts, but then the people on the street and like the people around him would never know that because he doesn't express those publicly, you know.
Yeah, and I thought it's interesting because they both are kind of on this journey. Like, both Hella and David are on this self discovery journey,
Mm-hmm.
and they both like she's trying to figure out what exactly it means to be like a woman without a man. So that's like why she's traveling. And then he's just kind of like left in the dust, kind of like left to figure out like, who exactly he is, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that they both kind of realize that like they live in this society where they kind of have to have this sort of relationship, and they're like, well, let's kind of just pretend. And it is pretty genuine on Hella's point of view, where she's just like, I can't do anything in society
Mm-hmm.
without a man attached to me, and her overall analysis of like sexism and misogyny, and David just like does not get it.
Yeah, no,
And
whenever she
she's
was
like
speaking, I was
trying to
like, "You're so
explain it
true,
to him.
girl. Like, I get you, girl." I go, like,
Hella,
yes.
I
Like, she was saying that, I was like, "Yeah, girl, I get you." And then he's like, "I just don't know what you're saying. It's like you're speaking a different language." I'm like, she could not be speaking more clearly about like how society views like women without their male escort, you know?
right? And I feel like it almost, I wish there was a little bit more like reflection from David on this, because it's, these struggles are connected. Like homophobia,
Yes.
sexism, misogyny, like it all exists underneath the overall like umbrella of a cis heteronormative patriarchy. And it would have been really cool to see it, but I think James just didn't have enough time to cook to like make that happen. But it was still
Yeah.
done in a way that I think if you are aware of these things, you can make that connection. So I can't knock it for what it is, but I wish it was in there. It just like a
Yeah.
little.
Which is really interesting to me too that there's almost like virtually no discussion of race within the story because like all of our main characters are pretty much French and then David is like a white man as well because he's described as being blonde early on, which I think it's really interesting too to be focusing on like a white man specifically experiencing this because like this is the only kind of oppression that any like white man can face is like by being not straight, you know?
Yeah, and part of me wonders because of like where it's located, like geographically, like France, England, Spain. It's a lot closer to Africa, so I don't like they didn't have chattel slavery
Yeah.
like we did in the States, which is also kind of like another dichotomy, like where America is supposed to be like, the best place on earth, like
Mhm.
hoorah, and it's very quickly exposed that like it's not, based on like their
Unless you are.
travels and what they're
Yeah.
experiencing. Because ultimately, like the only time we see anything really truly bad happen is when
Giovanni.
Giovanni kind of like crashes out, and he's like, okay, I'm not gonna fight for you, I'm not gonna like do anything, and he's kind of losing his self control and doesn't have money and is trying to like get his job back, and then he ends up getting convicted of murder for his boss.
Yeah. Which it's really interesting to me too because it is alluded throughout the story that one you either think Giovanni's dead or there is like a side mention too because there's like a scene where like the way that the story is told is very bizarre because it's like there's flashbacks but it's like the way that it's done is really weird so like the timeline is not linear in any way shape or form and I feel like you do kind of have to like reorient yourself for some scenes because I know there's like a scene whenever he was talking like he was saying like oh I saw Jacques whenever I was getting breakfast somewhere or whatever and then he and Jacques like sit out at the on the patio or whatever and talk about like Giovanni his conviction he's like oh yeah like where he was like oh like Giovanni called me for one last time asking for money like before it happened, sort of thing, but you don't know like what it is. Where I thought it was going to be more related to like AIDS, I guess, where I thought he was going to like I don't know what you thought.
I didn't know what I thought. I thought like him, when it talked about like, because it very early on it talks about like Giovanni's execution. I thought maybe it was like a social thing, and it was
Yeah.
a little bit bigger, not like a quite literal like, oh, this man is
Yeah,
being
no.
executed via guillotine
Yeah.
because he killed somebody. And I think it's, I'm trying to think if it's Jock who talks about, somebody talks about prison and the
Yeah.
death
No.
penalty, and how the death
Yeah.
penalty is the preferred option because to live in prison forever, it completely shapes who you are.
I
And
don't
how
think it's
like
Jacques. I think he was saying he was like reading a prisoner's like account of
yeah, oh
something.
yeah, it was David who was talking about how
Yeah.
like the person that he knew or whatever that went to
Yeah.
prison,
And then got out
they
of
are
prison.
completely
Yeah.
changed. Like especially if you've served a lot of time, like your reintegration into society is different. Like you're constantly scared and watching your back. Like you can never relax, I guess,
Yeah.
is what the speculation. And I can't say this, that this is what is going to happen every single time. But I can imagine living in a situation like that. I mean, I see like what happens with unhoused people. They're not in prison, but they can't sleep well at night because they are worried they're going to be harmed. And I imagine the same thing works, or it can be applicable to like the people of Gaza, where they're living in like the largest open air prison, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like it's not legal. It's like an interesting like the way this all kind of ties back into like the carceral system, and
Yeah.
punishment and punitive like justice. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was really interesting to tie that all back in because I feel like David was just such a transformative justice kind of a dude where he's just like, no, it's fine because of like his frame of reference, but also he had his own faults, whereas Giovanni is very much like clean, concise American doing things, meaning be very
You're getting
like,
them mixed up. You said Giovanni. I think you meant David.
oh, probably. But you know what I mean? Like it felt like it kind of went in line with their characters. Like
Well,
Giovanni is stuck in a prison cell of like his own creation in a way, but also in like what society is imposing upon him and like how
yes.
he should engage and
Well,
be in relationships.
even like Giovanni's like character, because you get his history as well, where like he ended up like he had like, I don't want to say a wife because I don't think they were technically married, but he had like a girlfriend that ended up falling pregnant, but then she gave birth to like a stillbirth child, and then that caused him to like leave God and then move to Paris too, which is like, I don't know, that was really weird to me because I was like, to me, I didn't fully like understand like the significance of that besides just giving like more trauma to Giovanni.
I think part of it is like it kind of like goes back into religion where it's just like how can like this god be like
All knowing, all seeing, all
testing me
powerful, but
and he's
then
like determining
cause
I should
harm.
have to live this way like me and
Mm-hmm.
my family, so he's just like I'm done with it, which does happen. Like
Mm-hmm.
religious people do like curse god and it's like a really big deal. It's like a there's Christian fiction about it if you want to
Yeah,
read it, if you're really
I'm sure
compelled.
there is.
But I think that's kind of what it tied back into. So maybe his form of self discovery came from going to Paris and kind of.
But like, I just feel bad for like his girlfriend or whatever too, and like his brother, like, cause he just like walked out on them, and like, did they just like presume he's dead? Too, like they have no like frame of reference, and he's like, I never want to go back to them and stuff, and like he's in his own way also is very similar to David too, because like they are like, because whenever David's like, I don't want to be in this room anymore, I hate this room, I want to be elsewhere, blah blah blah, because then he ends up doing the same thing to Hella. And then Giovanni's like, oh, you want to go back to America? He's like, I don't want to go back to America, let's go to Italy. And he's like, I'm not going back to my home either, where it's just like having all of this unresolved trauma rather than, I don't know. It seems so different for Giovanni's character for how he is too, where it seems like he just crashes out a lot. I guess.
He is a lot younger and he's had a lot more traumatic things
Yeah.
happen to him in such a short like time frame. And I think it could just, I mean, living in Italy post World War II, I can't imagine like what I don't actually know all of the economics and material conditions of like what was going on after like fascism was
Mm-hmm.
defeated. I'm using that loosely because I really don't know the overall economic and political structure that happened after Mussolini fell. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming
Well,
that
because
there
this
was
is
a
also
lot.
post War War. This is like, I guess it'd be kind of significantly over 10 years past World War II being over.
And then you just have
Which,
Cold War.
yeah, which I feel like this doesn't really have a lot of implications of like any Cold War things going on. Whether I feel like that would almost be more prevalent in Europe in a way.
I don't
You
know because
know,
there's no mention of
the USSR
GDR
or
or
anything.
anything.
Yeah, but I feel like, well, because like Germany's right next to France, pretty much.
I don't know. I thought that was odd, but I guess it probably would have made the book a lot longer. And this is just meant to be like a novella, I think, is because it's less than 200 pages. It might be considered a novella. I don't think it's a
Okay.
proper novel on a technical level. I don't know because a lot of older books, like even what did we read earlier this year with the book club? The Haunting of Hill House. That was a rather
That was like
short
last year.
novel.
Was that
Yeah,
even
we
with
read
the
it with
book
the book
club?
club.
No, we
I think
didn't.
so.
I think we just read that on our own, to be honest.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. Don't quote me.
I don't think
Edit
we
this
read that
out.
with the book club.
But you know what I mean? Because Shirley Jackson is like known for writing like short stories, and this was like her
Yeah.
novel. It's
Yeah,
just
we
not as
definitely
long.
did not read that with the book club.
Sorry. Um, let's see. Do we have any nonfiction recommendations for this episode? Was there anything that popped into your mind while you were reading this and
Not
you're like,
really. I don't know about you. I don't know. It was just something like I've never really read before. Like I don't even have like a frame of reference for this, because like I'm going to look to see if there's anything.
I think a good book is Conflict is Not Abuse by Sarah
Oh,
Schulerman.
Schumer.
Schumer,
I thought it was
not the
something
one
like
from
that.
TikTok, a
Yeah,
different one.
I think that's
But it's
I
all
always
about
get them confused
transformative
because they do have the
justice.
same name.
And she talks about queer relationships too and
Oh,
how
I
like
wonder
carceral they can be.
in the Dream House by Carmen
Maria
Maria
Machado.
Machado. Well, because I think it's kind of similar in the way that it's like it is queer. I mean, obviously it's a lesbian relationship in like 2000s rather than the 50s, but it does explore like abusive relationships. And while I don't know if I'd classify like David and Giovanni's relationship as abusive necessarily, it is definitely toxic. So I do think you could probably see parallels within that to this.
Yeah, I think like getting to the heart of like transformative justice, and then obviously like you could read like Feminism for the 99% if you want an idea. Just a very quick little bite-sized book on why intersectionality is such an important aspect
Yeah.
to the feminist struggle and how it includes homophobia and imperialism and whatnot. Like all of the things. It's really quick, very short, to the point. I'm really trying to think. Maybe I also think that you could probably read Down Girl, the Logic of Misogyny, because it does kind of get into what exactly misogyny is if you go past like on a philosophical level, like the naive conception that like misogyny is just men who hate women, and getting down
Yeah.
to how it is the policing and enforcing of patriarchal ideology. I think that's a really strong novel. That's what I think. Also, her other one about fat phobia, because David was a little fat phobic towards that one girl. I
Oh
can't even
yeah.
remember her name, and I feel really
Sarah or something. I think it's like Sarah
yeah.
or something like that. Something with an S.
Anyways,
I mean,
that's all I have right
yeah.
now. But like, I don't because that wasn't super relevant. It was kind of like a throwaway, like him trying to have some sort of resolve. Like, I actually do like women.
Yeah, I just love hating them. Which I feel like this is the 50s and stuff, but I feel like that's one thing. I saw like a tweet about this. Like I like on Twitter right now, like all the Pride Month Discord is happening just because it's Pride Month too, and like it's just really frustrating whenever like you're reading queer novels and it's like they're always like cheating on their significant other to like discover themselves, which is like can be like a frustrating like I don't know if I want to say like trope to constantly have in this because that's kind of like what ends up happening with like David and stuff where it's like you don't always have to like be in a relationship and like ruining that relationship with another person too because like even with like the ending scene with the like Hella and David whenever she like shows up at the bar because he's like been sleeping with like the sailor man or whatever and
Mm-hmm.
she's like I should have always known sort of thing and like the way that David treats like Hella is just so poorly and like being queer does not an excuse to treat other people without respect either.
Yeah, this was a very sad novel. I think the ending was very heartbreaking, very sad. Like,
I
kind of
know,
living
yeah.
this like ambiguous
It's almost like existential, I think, in a way, which I
like, is
wasn't
he ever
really
actually dead, or is he just alive living somewhere else, like doing something different? I
or even if like if David is ever going to come truly to terms with his sexuality and how he feels about people. Hopefully he does, but I doubt. You don't just like unlearn these toxic behaviors either. He needs therapy,
I
which I don't.
imagine, especially back in the 1950s when this was published, this was probably quite profound when
Yeah,
it
I
came
bet.
out,
I
because this
imagine
was
a lot of
not like other
people.
literature.
I imagine like a lot of queer men were probably able to relate at the time too, just because of the way like heteronormative society is pushed, especially on Americans. I mean, James Baldwin was publicly queer, so I don't know how many like straight men were like, "Let me pick up this queer author's novel" without like, you know what I'm saying? Unless they're like had some type of like questioning within themselves. It's okay to question yourself, guys. Just don't do it at the expense of other people. That's the overarching message of Giovanni's Room. And then I guess with
That's
that,
it for this episode. What's next? Our next book club read, though, for July looks like it's going to be the fifth season by N.K.
the
Jemisin.
poll
I
ended just now.
Okay. I was like, I don't know if it's over or not. It was a little tight there for a moment.
It was.
Did it win?
It did. 32% versus 28% of the Devils.
What's our next book talk? It's going to be June reading wrap up, I think.
Yeah, it should be. That'll be in July, though, so.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's kind of weird when we're filming this because
we're filming this way early. Yeah, because I will be on vacation the next week that this goes up, so we had to film. We finished this way earlier than we typically would, because usually we probably would not have finished this until like the last Sunday of the month.
Yeah, no joke. We sprinted,
and we're like halfway.
I kind of wish I wouldn't have. I will read his whole like backlog. I absolutely.
Okay, that's your own fault for sprinting through it though, because I started this on the 11th, and I like read a chapter a day, except for today. I think I read 2 chapters, but every other day I read 2 chapters a day, so I wasn't really sprinting through it. That's your own fault for delaying it all till today.
It was hard. I was busy. Kids happen. What are you gonna do?
Other than that, thanks for listening. Don't forget, if you're on YouTube, you can subscribe to us and you can like the video, or if you're on Spotify, you can follow us, or any other listening platform. You can follow us, rate us 5 stars, whatever have you. But other than that, thank you and good night.